Hi, Mansi.
Hi, Mironel. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this relatively last minute. We're going to talk to you a little bit about your upcoming session on November 21st on Stepping Beyond Binary Thinking, which you really warmly offered to the Living Bridges platform, uh, which is focusing on NVC and social change. And I thought would be lovely to get a sense of the session and a little bit about you. So, would you like to start by talking to us about you and your NVC journey?
Yeah, sure. I'd be happy to. Yeah, first of all, I'm happy to be here and I'm glad to be a part of this, and I'm very curious about all of it and how it will be. As about myself, yeah, right now I'm sitting in Berlin, Germany, in Europe. I'm partly European, but I grew up in Canada. And when I was in Canada, I was actually quite involved in the environmental movement and in activism. And and in some ways, I got frustrated in that space, especially around how people were becoming very adamant, very vehement, and in some ways, I would even say like somehow violent about how they would hold their cause, how they would hold their strategies about the right way to live and take care of the earth. And in a lot of ways, of course, I would align, but there was something about that energy that didn't feel, didn't sit well with me, didn't sit peacefully with me. So I at that moment I went on a journey actually to India to look into myself, and I found yoga as a spiritual practice, and and this helped me really get this perspective on what it means to be in the ego mind and having a strong agenda, and what it means to hold that more openly and in a place I would call like the heart. And much later on, I got in touch with NVC, which is, for me at least, a way of applying that same type of perspective very practically into life and into relationships and into how we organize ourselves in groups, in systems, in the society. So it's been really like I'm now describing like really my whole life's journey from my youth as an activist to going into spirituality as a response to the dualism, the binary thinking in activism, and then coming into NVC as a way of applying what I had seen as a sort of a spiritual perspective back into the world. And so yeah, that's I think one of the reasons why this theme is so important to me, because in some ways this particular theme, and in a platform which is about social change, holds like, yeah, like in some ways it holds my whole life's journey. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that because I knew you. Well, we've known each other for a while, and I didn't know a few of these pieces about your life and your journey. I didn't realize how much resonance there is between what we're trying to create here and what you've been through. That adds a certain depth to what you're offering. Um, Speaking of which, this is a session on stepping beyond binary thinking. As you say, it's partly, I guess, in response to, or it comes from this frustration around the almost strict binaries and violence in those strict binaries, especially in the social change space, which is something that this year, COVID, with everything, we've actively learned about that. We've actively experienced that kind of push and pull within us, the intensity of those sort of how important these strategies become to us. And yet, when we hold them so tightly, we lose something. So I'd really love to hear a little bit about what you're offering, um, where it comes from, and what's behind the session.
Yeah. Um, like the first thing that comes up is a memory I have of getting an email from, I think it was Avaz or one of these online activists groups. Um, And it was an email addressed to Statoil, who was exploring the South Seas around New Zealand for oil. And the email basically started by saying, "We demand that you cease and desist all activities of this and that." And basically the message I got from the email and the petition that I'm invited to sign was, "Dear Statoil, please stop existing." And since when we're talking about social change, we're talking about cooperating with human beings. We're talking about involving people in how we do things together. And when I say together, I mean it in the biggest sense of as a species, as a whole society. And to say to someone, please don't exist, and even if that someone is a company, that a lot of people I imagine are going to identify with that company, have put their lives into that company. So that company isn't just a formless beast that we sometimes look at it as activists, but it's representing people and people's livelihood. So I wanted to really reframe that message and say instead, "Dear Statoil, thank you so much for a history of providing energy to humanity and providing resources for an amazing shift in the quality of life of many people on Earth over the decades that you have been bringing fossil fuels into the world. Now that we've reached a tipping point when that doesn't seem sustainable, would you be willing to redirect the amazing amounts of resources, technology, money towards still providing energy for humanity in ways that are also in harmony with the Earth?" And that just felt like such an important way to reframe a conversation with a fossil fuel giant, not making them the enemy, but recognizing in what way, first of all, they are also human and also fulfilling needs in their own way. And second of all, how there is potential for cooperation. And I want to believe that there is always, or almost always, most of the time, potential for cooperation with every human being. And so for me, NVC is exactly like a way to facilitate that cooperation. And stepping out of binary thinking is also like an important ingredient in creating the conditions for cooperation with people with whom I have different views, apparently contradictory or conflictual views.
I find that incredibly valuable because, as you use the word human, that there are human beings who are involved in these decisions that have brought us to this point, and all of those human beings are also trying to meet needs or have been trying to meet needs. And that's such a pivotal shift from a lot of the way that social change organizations and people operate, where the other becomes inhuman, or this is an inhuman act. This is something that is not right. It shouldn't exist, which to me has such a dangerous and risky potential of alienating the other, and therefore losing that potential for actual systemic change rather than coping strategies where we won a little piece of the planet or a little piece of the puzzle, and to kind of lose track of what is human in all of that, or the fact that these are all strategies that are always available to all of us, and some of us, due to some other reasons, are making different choices. And if we can draw that back into the conversation, that awareness that we're all human and we hold that as integral, I do find that makes quite a profound difference to the conversation. And
exactly, yeah. And like one of the first things I want to hold with care when I hear that is the pain that I might be in, or that, let's say, our friendly social activists might be in around those actions. So when I'm inviting us to see Statoil as human, I'm not inviting us to step over our pain, our grief about what has happened, about the destruction of the earth, the environment, the injustice or the oppression of different peoples. So I want to really recognize my own grief, recognize how I experience this as a tragedy. And even as I do that, staying open for that humanity and dismantling my enemy image. So this is already for me an example of stepping out of binary thinking. I don't want to think, oh, I need to see everyone as human, therefore my own rage and my own anger isn't acceptable. But I also don't want that my rage and my anger creates an enemy image out of those other people. So I want to hold both with care. I am angry, or I am devastated, I am sad, and that doesn't make them the enemy. They are also in their humanity living the life in the way that they, for all the reasons that they have, think is best. So then me grieving the grief, holding the pain or my rage or whatever form it takes, is also a first step in stepping beyond binary thinking. So that's sort of one thing I want to be careful of. It's already embracing my reality and the reality of the other. It's not either or.
Yeah. So I'm really living, if I'm holding it like that, then I'm likely to really be living the idea that my needs matter and your needs matter. It's not that only this matters or only that matters.
Exactly. Yeah.